Breakfast Mark is coming. I've got a seat right for you here. What? No, what really gives you that? I think we're all here, so why don't we see it?
Very good. Well, and I'll be very quick because we have, I think, some very informative presentations for you today. And I know you were full of great questions for all the presenters. I did just want to note that you probably heard in the news this morning we had an incident shutting down the west side of my library line last night. I thought I'd pass around this picture of actually what happened, which is that a errant vehicle about 11 p.m. last night actually went through the interchange and dropped itself into the tent-cover box that connects to the Sunset Fancy Center, landing on the campground wires, pulling the tree with it at the same time. This required a great deal of logistics, and we were still under repair on the whole line, but we had to get Campbell crane in to actually put the machinery in place to actually lift the car out. And then that was completed by early this morning, but then the staff has to go in and actually just take the camera line to make sure all the no other damage was done to the system overall. Current expectation is 6 p.m. startup of the line, so we now have, I think we're trying to get 20 buses in circulation in response to the Carrington passenger demand between the transit center and the library station down here. So we have trains in circulation between Hatfield Government Center and Treewood Transit Center, and then on the east side from the library station and Progression. And so they're moving around. And again, Green Line and Yellow Line service are not affected by this. So again, we hope that we're working really hard to get this repair done. My hats off to our staff. We have a lot of our staff had a very sleepless night last night, trying to respond to this, getting the equipment, getting the contracting in place to actually do the repair work starting this morning, but it's a fairly major incident. I might note that we, chatting with Mary at the outset, we actually had a similar incident in 1998, just after the line opened. In that case, it was an elderly gentleman whose car veered off into the middle of this fairly big interchange, if you're familiar.
This is going south, 26 eastbound to 217 southbound.
Right, that's where the box is, yeah. But yeah, exactly. And in this case, the operator of this vehicle was arrested for a DUI and reckless driving. So, and again, by 11 p.m. last night, so obviously not a lot of staff around, a lot of people around to respond to that. So a lot of call-ins, a lot of sleepless nights. And then trying to get word to our customers as well this morning. Customer service staff is at each end of the line. Obviously, in these situations, information is always imperfect, but we're working as hard as we can to get the right information to our customers. But I was just going to note that in the past, since that did happen, we actually installed some additional barriers, and we're not sure if this car actually went over those barriers or found another approach into the. But we'll look again, and safety again, a full investigation of this to see if there's anything else we can do to feel harden that site. The problem, of course, is it's a very high-speed area, and some people decide to make it higher speed than it should be. And just a report on that.
Does he have insurance?
It's a BMW, so we hope so. And just to note, we're very simple. Very simple. Shelley has drilled into her operations staff to get the insurance information first. So, I did want to also just update you on two other service issues that we have that really result from our service change this last September. And they are, if you will, hotspots where we have some customer neighbor complaints. One is, and I met with the neighbors associated with this yesterday up at, we call it the Deacon Triangle, but it's where there's a restaurant called the Firehouse near Deacon, and just a few blocks east of MLK. And that's an area where we currently are now turning the number 8 bus around, but prior to that, in front of Woodlawn Park, we actually have a layover right now. And it's that layover that is really causing the consternation with the neighbors. It's a lot of activity in terms of dieseling or idling buses and a noise that wasn't there. So we're working really hard to try to find a solution. As you know, the number 8 bus is a very frequent service bus, has a lot of service on it, so what that means is also a lot of layover activity with it. So we're working really hard to try to find a solution. My own view is that that location where we have the layover now isn't sustainable in the long term, both in terms of providing service to our operators who need better bathroom facilities than we have there, and also for the neighbors. So just want to let you know we're working hard to work for a solution. It is very hard to find layover spots in heavily developed urban areas, and that continues to be one of our challenges, really system-wide. The other area I just wanted to alert you that we're also working on is, you might remember we split the line 12 and the line 94 on 99, Highway 99 in the Tigard Sherwood stretch. So the line 12 now runs to the Tigard Transit Center, the 94 runs further south. And some people are having troubles transferring when they're having a longer trip, particularly the midday trips. So we're looking at, is there either a routing or a stop configuration that would ameliorate that, or are there some other service changes that we need to do to make sure that our customers are well served? So again, we received a petition from a number of the riders, and then I had over 200 names. It was a substantial voice of concern, and we wanted to just acknowledge that and let you know that we're doing some onboard surveys right now to try to understand the travel patterns a little bit more, so and hopefully can redesign a more specific pattern to respond to that. The other underlying message that I think comes from this is how hard it is to reduce service, and that these patterns are ones that people come to rely on, and we even look for efficiency. I think even the number 8 efficiency, believe it or not, is actually showing ridership in that area growing because of the realignment of the number 6 line, and it seems to be, well received by riders, but it has other implications that I think we obviously need to work through. I just also note that I think in both these cases it's areas where we've also acknowledged that we needed to do more outreach and communication than perhaps we had time to do last year, and so we're looking at ways to embellish that as we move forward. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Comments? Okay. Good, thank you very much. So I guess we're going to move on then to the update on the Port of Milwaukee Light Rail project.
Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here today to brief you on the progress of the Port of Milwaukee project. We were here, I think it was about 6 months ago in May, before we had gotten our full funding grant agreement to review the project status at that time, and glad to be back here today. A lot has changed since then, but the basic story from then is still the same today. The project's going very well, pleased to report. It is a real honor to be able to be associated with this fantastic team, led by Rob and Leah and a whole bunch of other folks working for capital projects. They do just such amazing work, and they're making this look easy, and it is not easy. It's a very difficult project, but we are really blessed to have that level of talent and depth of experience from the staff that's done a number of previous projects. We also brought in some new people, as we always do. It's just really terrific, and I first and foremost want to compliment them for making it look so easy. So we have some slides up on the board behind you, so for you folks in the front row, you might want to reposition yourselves, because I'm going to be referring to them quite a bit. Okay. This is just a basic orientation slide for everyone in the room, just to kind of remind ourselves of the overall project. 7.3 mile extension running from the south end of downtown, across a new bridge, and then along 17th and the railroad corridor down to Southeast Park Avenue. 10 stations in total, 2 park and ride lots, lots of bike spaces, this new multimodal bridge. We're going to have a lot to say about that. For starters, I just thought I would briefly go over the financial basics, starting with these 2 slides, or these 2 graphs, which show our resources. I'll start with the one on the left. These are our local funds. Half of the project cost, $745.18 million in local cost. And if we start at 12 o'clock, we can see that the funds received come all the way around past 9 o'clock, so we're doing very well there. What remains is about $24 million in cash and in-kind yet to get. Most of that, and the big single piece of that, is TriMet's remaining contributions. So as you recall, we did an initial bond sale for the first part of our contribution. There's another bond sale later for the remainder. So, some of the other pieces in there are some in-kind contributions coming both in right-of-way and staff time from some of the jurisdictions along the alignment. So no particular worries about any of that. This remaining piece then is the accrued finance cost. If you'll recall, the project, any of the project resources locally that are borrowed costs incur interest costs, and that is included both in the project as a cost and as a local contribution of in-kind money, and so that generates match on the federal side. So that's simply being accrued as it is incurred. Looking on the federal side, we see a different situation there. Of our $745 on that side, we have received our first installment of $85 million, which came in the prior fiscal year. Now for the current fiscal year and every subsequent one until the remainder is paid out, we anticipate a schedule of $100 million per year. And so, in fact, later today, Neil and Olivia and I are going back to DC to meet with FTA and some of our congressional delegation just to make sure we have the latest information on how that's playing out. There's currently a continuing resolution that continues the program for 6 months of the current fiscal year. But as you know, there's a lot of discussions going on back in DC about the so-called fiscal cliff and how that might affect some of these programs. And so we don't really anticipate getting our $100 million payment until it becomes a little more clear how the second half of that fiscal year is going to be laid out. On the cost side, as of the end of October, we had incurred about $451 million through the end of the month. That stands at about 30% complete in terms of money, but we're also about 30% complete in terms of construction period schedule and 30% complete in terms of work on the ground based on how we anticipated the schedules would be built. So that's really a great place to be. It means our time, our progress, and our money are all tracking uniformly together. With that, what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Rob and Leah and go through some of the progress slides just to give you some, can't get out there as much as any of us would like to, but there's some really good things happening out there. We've got some nice photographs to show you what's going on.
All right. With that orientation, quickly, of course, the west is on the west side, extending the project from where the mall project ended, going down through Lincoln, through South Waterfront, and over the bridge, and then over to Leah's section on the east side, which is quite vast. On Lincoln Street here, this is just by Portland State University. We've completed the work on the north side of the street and on the south side of the street, and relocated the majority of the utilities, so it's about 95% done. Now we're working in the center section, doing the track, and we hope to install the first section of light rail track. Now Leah's done a lot of heavy rail track already, but the first section of light rail track this week, hopefully, and then we'll get some photo opportunities with that. You remember that this is the harbor structure. These are the curved girders that were manufactured locally at Tout Steel in Tigard. Those are fully installed. All the foundations are installed. And just off to the slide to the left, we're actually installing the concrete deck, and we've done the first section of that and are moving from the south over to the north. So that structure is really taking shape. If you ever get a chance to do a field tour, walking up on that deck, it's a great experience. We're hoping you to do that someday. This is over in the south waterfront. This is where the west segment ends. And so this new station will be right in here. And you'll notice that it seems to be a little high compared to where the new building, this is the Collaborative Life Sciences. This is because the soils in South Waterfront are a little spongy. And so you want to load it up heavy and drive that softness out before you actually build your finished surfaces, because you don't want to mold to crack. So it's a little high right now. That settlement will take about 8 months. So if it doesn't go like all the geotechs project, that could be a schedule pressure. But right now it's tracking as we anticipate. But that's why if you go out there and go, that looks a little high. It's that way on purpose because you're putting some extra weight on it. On the bridge, remember this is a design build. Because of the complexity of how you build it, relates to the forces and how you need to design it, so those two are partnered together. The design is about 95% complete, and as Dan mentioned, we're currently on schedule for that work. This is a section of the west tower over by South Waterfront. There are 9 sections, and we're just getting ready to pour the 9th section here. There is a 10th section, which is a precast topper, and that'll be installed in the spring of 2014 when we're done with all the cable work. So that last section is being poured this week and next week, and that'll be the last section. We're also doing work on the pier table. That's a term of art. That's a section that's by the tower that doesn't have cables on it. They call it the pier table. And we poured the beams and actually the first section of that, about a 100-foot section. Over on the other side of the river, on the east tower over by OMSI, you can see that the pile cap has been installed. All of those sheet piles that you saw on your field tour, those have been removed prior to the end of the fish window, which expired at the end of October. And the tower crane that you see here in this picture is now fully installed, so as you drive by, you can actually see both of them. Looked at that this morning on the steel bridge on the train over. You can see both those tower cranes. And you'll start to see form work as they begin to do these pylons. So you'll start to see this side of the river come up out of the ground as well. With that, move it over to the lead segment.
So in the east segment, which we were here just last month to look at the total contract price, work has been progressing throughout the entire alignment. The first picture here is at Powell. As you recall, in the summer we demolished the existing Powell roadway structure, and now we're in the build-up of the new replacement 2 structures, one for light rail and one for the roadway. We've completed significant utility work on the north side that's allowing us to start building the walls and retaining walls on the south side. On 17th Avenue, this is a shot of some of the utility work. We have utility work in progress still in a number of locations on the alignment. We have completed the work at Holgate as of last week. That was a big milestone. It was a big impact to our operations, and we will still have more impacts to bus operations, but we completed a series of deep manhole replacements and sewer lining at Holgate. 30% of the utility work on the east segment is complete overall. We have significant numbers of structures on the east segment, and this is a shot at Johnson Creek. But in the last few months, we've had significant progress. We've completed all of the foundation work for the Herald structure, the Tacoma structure, Johnson Creek here, and then we've also, just in the last month, completed the foundations for the Tillamook structure. So our team, many different subcontractors, but we're moving southward for the completion of foundations on our structures. In this summer and at the end of September, we completed significant freight relocation. So we had the first rail on the east was freight rail. So we're spreading the love all around the project for the types of work. But this relocation was necessary. It's phase 3 of a 5-phase choreographed moving of freight track so that we can build our light rail tracks on the Tillamook branch. And this is adjacent to operating freight rail. We also had a successful 30-day shutdown for 2 customers that was organized with them in advance to ensure that they had supplies necessary to tide them over until their spur tracks were back in service. And this is at the Kellogg structure. We completed the work bridge that will allow us to work throughout the year. And we have just last week started the large foundation work for this structure. And we've also completed both the north and south abutment foundations. So a lot of progress throughout the entire line. I would note for this structure, we start the steel fabrication next week for the weathering steel tug girders. And I would note here that our project has made, and similar to other projects, that we want to ensure that our local businesses and local contractors are involved. And here's an example. Our contractor, Stacy Whitback, is working throughout the east segment. We have Milwaukee Lumber in downtown Milwaukee, who provided competitive pricing for their materials, and it has been providing us with materials for the east segment.
Any questions on those progress slides? Rob and Leah, thank you very much. I'm going to cover all the really terrific work that Jillian's group has been doing in right-of-way acquisitions. You've been very involved in this through the condemnation actions and so forth. It's going quite well. So a total of 196 acquisitions to be obtained. 54 of those are full, so you can see the vast majority of them are these partial and temporary acquisitions that we have in the slivers. Most of the energy is into these, but of course, each one of those is a file on its own that requires all the same procedures. The numbers aren't as big. So far, we have 88 properties in our possession. You can see a little bit the impact of those in this chart. What this chart shows is by square footage and by year that we anticipated getting it, how much property is actually available to us for construction. And so you can see that, obviously all of 2011 except a little piece of property that we're not building on, it's just related to the Moody Avenue area. 2012 going along quite well, still some more to get. And then we've already chipped away at some of the properties we needed in 2013. So right away going well. These relocations are probably our most complicated piece of work in the right-of-way program. And a number of those large industrial relocations we've had to do have been extraordinarily complicated. So just a tremendous amount of work going on to try to move the businesses, find new locations, keep the business going, and provide all the support they need to get up and running in a new location. We can look at the next slide. This cuts the right-of-way acquisitions in a slightly different way. This is by amount of money. So again, in this pie chart, 74, almost 75% of the properties we have settled. That is, we have an agreement in place. Most of them we have possession on, and they're now ours. Of the remainder, the vast majority of them, we already have appraisals, appraisal concurrences, and offers made. So this little sliver, almost too small to see here in green, that's the amount we don't have appraisals on yet. So the takeaway from this slide is the cost for the land are very well known to us now. There's just very little further variable in understanding the costs. At your September tour of the project, we handed out something we called the dashboard. I'm not going to go through all of it today. We just want to keep this current, and if you have any feedback on whether these are the right kinds of information, or if you want to see them in different formats or different sizes, we're happy to do that. It's intended just to give you a very high level some of our key performance indicators in the project. On that list of items today, though, what we really want to do is zoom in on the contingency status, and then John L. is going to talk about DVE and workforce, and we'll update you on the employment statistics. So let's move ahead and look at contingency. Back in May, we talked about where we were on our contingency levels, and this is an update of that same information. So just again to set the stage here, we work very closely with FTA and their project approval process to determine how much contingency is appropriate for the project. We then take that total contingency and break it down into distinct uses. So we have a portion of money set aside for right-of-way. These next two, final design and bid market, are basically what we call requirements risk. That is, as the project develops through its design and taking the pricing from budget estimates to actual hard money bids, you need some contingency because there's always some surprises, there's a little bit of scope movement around the edges, there's conditions put on permitting that require additional work. So we have a couple contingency buckets for those. These next three are primarily construction risks. That's obviously where the vast majority of the money is, because that's where the most expensive risks occur. So some of our risks are covered in the contract when we write it, if you recall from some of the approvals you made. Some of them included actual allocations of risk. If we pass a risk to the contractor, we give them some money to take on that risk. Conversely, some of them are risks we hold, and we have what we call provisional sums to be able to draw on should that risk be encountered. And then we have construction change order allowance. You approve those with the original contract, where you give us the base contract amount and then a allowance to go with that for change orders that are customarily occur in the field. And then finally, we have this unprogrammed claims amount. These are for basically if we have any really large change orders or big surprises or commercial issues with our contractors, we have that available to us to resolve those issues. And then finally, we have this owner's reserve. This is sort of the unprogrammed allowance that we have to draw from. Every project has plenty of things that come along, and so what this is essentially doing is protecting the general fund. It gives us a cushion to be able to complete the project without having to bleed over into our obviously very, very tightly constrained general fund. Next slide shows where we are on all of those, and I guess in summary I would say we're exactly where we would expect to be at this point in the project. The right-of-way contingency has been all drawn down now, and the vast majority of that is for relocations, and so we'll probably need some additional amount. Final design, of course, we're virtually complete with design, so as appropriately we've drawn down almost all of that contingency bucket. Similarly with bid market, we've drawn down quite a bit of that. We still have a couple fairly large contracts to go, so it's appropriate that we have a little bit left to cover final pricing on those. Risk table and construction change orders, I would say that we've drawn very little of those, although we've programmed the vast majority of it. So before you think there's a lot of money left over here, I just want to point out that those risk tables are already built into the large contracts. Now, hopefully we'll have good experience and we won't need to draw on that risk money, but it's basically already assigned to a use. And we wind up not needing then at the end would roll back over to owner's reserve. Exact same situation with construction. Most of this has been programmed to the contracts that have been let. There's a little left for the remaining contracts to go. And then these two basically haven't been tapped yet. And that's a good place to be because we know we're going to need it. Now, I don't know about claims. Our history with claims has been pretty good. But, you know, we have some very, very technically challenging work, particularly with the bridge. So, you know, it's a long way to go yet in construction. Owner's reserve, we know there will be demands on this. I already mentioned right-of-way is going to need some more money, particularly for the remainder of the relocations. They're just costing us more than we anticipated. Some of them, like Pico, making the airline components, just much more complicated relocation program than we had estimated. And so we're going to need some additional contingency to finish off that program. We also find when we start up these projects and when the new vehicle design comes along, there are always things that wind up needing some money. Sometimes we have to make some changes on the existing vehicles to make sure they all integrate properly. And with startup costs, there's always some surprises putting it into operation. So, you know, I can say that we're in a good position here, but, you know, the takeaway is that all that blue is not freeboard. It's programmed for a specific purpose, and as everything we know right now, the vast majority of it's likely to be needed. I want to show these numbers in a slightly different way. Let me explain the chart first. What this is basically a drawdown of how we would expect to spend our contingency over time. So obviously we had some of it programmed early for right-of-way and design and bidding. There's more coming out here for construction. What the colors show us is essentially where the FTA's comfort level is with our contingency drawdown. So they're perfectly fine with us drawing down as long as we stay anywhere in the green band. You know, they're happy with that. If we start needing to draw into the red levels, they want to have a seat at the table for approving that amount of contingency, because then they begin to fear that you might not have enough going forward. And that's pretty much based on projects all across the country. So these crosshairs are where we are today, and as you can see, that's a really great place to be. It's just slightly below sort of the minimum expected drawdown. It's well where the FTA is concerned about our location, so basically we're doing really well. We had our quarterly meeting with the FTA just last week, and the regional administrator, Rick Chalice, paid the team and Rob a tremendous compliment. All of this work, there's just a tremendous amount of detail behind all of this, assigning all that contingency buckets to each individual contract and change order, and keeping track of all that is really quite a lot of work. And we're doing it at a very high level of sophistication, and they provided that compliment to Rob, and what they'd like us to do is develop this a little bit further for their other grantees as a best practices for contingency. So that's kind of on their nationwide view. This is about as good as it can be done. So we're really very proud of that. With that, I want to turn it over to Janelle to bring you up to date on sort of the DBE program and where some of our numbers are as of today. All right.
Thank you, Dan. President Warner, members of the board, John Bell, Director of Diversity and Transit Equity. Before I kick off here, on the other side of the dashboard that Dan pointed out is a dashboard that gives you a snapshot of what is occurring with our DBE program. It's a DBE dashboard. Fascinating and very intriguing information just in terms of who we're reaching, types of contracts, the size of those contracts. I have probably the easiest job in some sense. TriMet has a long-standing DBE program which creates opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses with the goal, frankly, of leveling the playing field. The purpose of the DBE program is to implement strategies which works to level the playing field, continue to remove the barriers making it difficult for DBEs to participate in contracting opportunities, and finding new and innovative ways to increase contracting opportunities to minorities, women, and emerging businesses. We get this question a lot, and the distinguishing piece, part of the confusion a lot of folks have when thinking about DBEs is, well, how is that different than MWS? And the quick answer is DBE is a mandated program, a required program of recipients of DOT funds, TriMet's recipient of those funds. So you'll see this also at ODOT, you'll see this in a lot of cities' projects that receive federal funds. And to qualify as a DBE, an applicant must demonstrate that the firm is owned at least 51% by a minority or a female, prove that they are socially and economically disadvantaged, demonstrate that the firm's management and daily operations are controlled by the majority owner. The State of Oregon Office of Minority, Women, and Emerging Small Business is a certifying agency. Other certifications that you've heard of are MBE, which is Minority Business Enterprises, Women Business Enterprises, which are WBEs, and Emerging Small Businesses, which are ESBs. So a little bit of alphabet soup for you there. Alphabet soup of small businesses in the state of Oregon. We encourage DBE participation by, frankly, structuring contracts to increase DBE participation, breaking them down in instances so that they are more achievable to smaller firms. On construction contracts, we require proposals to address DBE and workforce participation. We require, for particularly our larger projects, that folks submitting proposals address how they're going to achieve our 20% workforce goal, but also their past experiences and their path forward of how they're going to stay true to TriMet's program. Through community outreach, we've built solid relationships with DBE communities, which helps us to get the word out about contracting opportunities. And through a series of proactive strategies, including monthly compliance meetings with our prime contractors, we monitor the progress primes are making in achieving DBE participation. We also conduct site checks out in the field to ensure that firms as well as our DBEs are in compliance with both TriMet's regulations but also federal regulations. And one of the most important things I think we do is continue to promote relationship building between prime contractors and subcontractors. So much of it are the relationships that the firms have with one another, and we try to create those opportunities. PMLR continues to surpass previous DBE efforts. That's noted in the dashboard, but I'll highlight a couple here. Over $48 million have been awarded to DBEs. Over 90 DBE firms currently are or have worked on the project, and over 200 contracts have been awarded to DBE firms. That is the largest in the region, so that's huge. And as I talk to colleagues across the country who is doing this work in other regulatory environments, this is one of the leading examples, and TriMet continues to be called in terms of how we do this work. We continue to achieve high DBE participation in both construction as well as professional service markets. One of the things that we've been focusing in on in the PMLR, and kudos to the leadership of Dan Blocker for sure, is increasing professional service opportunities, and that's gone very well.
Okay, just also part of the overall employment aspects of the project, as you know, we keep a current count of all the firms and jobs that we have. So this is our status through currently. I must have been just in a matter of days ago we wrapped up these numbers. 323 firms so far have or are working on the project, and 100 of those are DBEs, which is a really admirable split. For jobs, out of the 14,500 we predicted, so far we have 2,273 in direct, that is design jobs or construction jobs, and then 1,959 indirect and induced. So at that pace, we're basically right around 30% of the projected total. Again, just like the other 30%, that's a good place to be. We seem to be, being pretty accurate so far in our projections, and of course the construction numbers will really ramp up in the next 2 years. And in the next slide, we break down the makeup of the construction jobs a little bit, particularly this chart here. So people of color in our construction hours so far, 23.4%, women 7.1%, and apprentices 15.4%. So again, those are all pretty good numbers. I think that pretty well reflects the community. I would say that we're going to check into our apprentice numbers a little bit. They actually are a little bit lower than we would expect. Most of our large contracts have a requirement for 20% apprentices, and that should be pretty consistent over the job. So what I don't know is if the apprentice hours are running a little behind, or if they're getting influence in that some of the total hours are coming from smaller contracts that don't have those requirements. So we're going to dig into that, but I would expect us to see closer to 20% when we get to the end.
Okay, so this map illustrates a snapshot of where we are attracting DBE firms, and just to kind of give you kind of an illustration of this. The larger circles, in this instance, is 25. This is kind of hard to see. Some of the smaller ones are a little bit more. So this gives you a really good example of where is PMLR attracting DBE firms throughout the region. And we pay attention to this for a variety of reasons, one of which is to find out where we might need to focus more outreach efforts, but also to get a sense of if we have oversaturation in the region. So what's on the horizon for DBE? As noted, we continue to achieve high participation on capital projects. The general manager has put me on charge, as well as our contracts department, to match this participation on non-capital projects. And the general fund, in partnership with the procurement and contracts department, we have started to assess and implement strategies to replicate the participation we've experienced on construction-related projects. So that's pretty exciting. There are a lot of opportunities there. TriMet purchases a lot of goods and services. We want to find out how we might replicate the experiences we've had on the construction side. We'll continue to build on our internship program, identifying opportunities for the next generation to engage in both construction as well as professional services opportunities. And lastly, FTA is currently undergoing a review of the federal DBE program nationally, which will make changes to the program. We'll keep abreast of those changes, and we'll update you as those come up. One important change is the creation of a small business provision, which will require us to increase participation of non-DBE firms, which would be ESPs and small businesses. So with that.
So just a couple more. We wanted to close off with just a little bit of a look ahead for some of the issues related to PMLR that will be coming to the board. One of the larger issues that's coming quickly is the interim financing package for the project, or sometimes called cash flow financing. This is normal and customary. We do this on all of our projects, and it comes about because of, as I described, that federal cash inflow coming in very structured, $100 million per year. That'll take us till 2019 or so to collect all those funds, but of course, all the money is being spent to open the project by 2015. So our CFO, Dave Auxier, is about ready to proceed with a bond issue so that we can sell bonds backed by those funds so that we have the cash flow necessary to prosecute the project. So it's a pretty big program. Our peak shortfall will be about $400 million. And you know, again, this is the customarily done not only with our project but with other projects. The interest costs are eligible costs and are included in the budget. So it's not a hit to the budget in any way. It's just, you know, necessary to bring the cash forward from the federal funds. Back in December of 2010, the board approved this as part of the overall project advancement and financing plan. And so we did a 60-day notice of these bonds. So what's coming now in December of this year, Dave will bring an item to the board with the details of the specific bond measure, you know, the interest rates and so forth. And it will be done in two components. Rather than bonding all of that amount, we'll bond an initial amount using fixed rate bonds and then come back later for some variable rate bonds. And that's just basically to optimize the program. So we'll be seeing that in December. As for other items, as I mentioned, we still have a couple of construction contracts to put into actual award. Some work out at Ruby Junction for some additional maintenance bays and storage tracks. The remodel of Center Street as part of the Moving Together program we talked about a couple months ago. The park and ride structure at Park Avenue. There are 3 additional art contracts. You did an initial package of them, but there were 3 left that weren't completed their design, so they'll be coming along in the next couple months. And then finally, a maintenance away facility to replace the one that was taken out on 17th Avenue by the construction. And then also just in support services, a few more contracts to go. Obviously, we'll still have some condemnations. There's one coming before you in November, probably another one in December. I think we'll see a decrease in those though now as we're getting into smaller and smaller properties, and we have the blanket condemnation authority you approved back in May for anything under 500,000, and so we're into that range now. I don't think there'll be a whole lot more of them, but you know, we'll still see a few more. I mentioned the interim finance bond sale. Some of our consultant contracts need to be increased a little bit. The real estate consultant and the Center Street construction management consultant, they both have incurred additional costs due to some minor scope changes. So we need to get some additional authority for those two. That's what we have for you today. I apologize, it's a lot of information coming at you pretty fast, but we'll pause here and I'll do my best to answer any questions or refer to staff any details you might like to have.
See any questions or comments?
Actually, question for Janelle. If I heard you correctly, FTA is now focusing on small business program. Is that, and so is that, I thought I heard you say that that will affect our DBE numbers, so will our percentages drop on that?
That is an unknown factor right now. Part of what FTA is in the regulatory environment that they are in. There's been a number of lawsuits that's challenged part of what they are trying to do to solidify the program's existence is to make it as neutral as possible. One of the ways that they're achieving that is the creation of a small business provision. One of the things that we would want to do to ensure that it does not impact our numbers is to ensure that all of our DBEs agencies are certifying also as ESPs, for instance. So many of them are. So that's one of the biggest things there. But it's an unknown factor. It's one that I frankly am concerned about. But in many instances, I think it can help us achieve larger numbers because of what the small business provision allows us to do in terms of targeting contracts and those kind of things.
Thank you. Questions?
A couple small ones. On the page right-of-way acquisitions, it looks like we still have one pending matter back to 2011. Is that a concern?
It's not a concern. It's one specific property in the south waterfront area. We don't need it right now to do any building, so it's an in-kind donation as well. So it's just still working through its paperwork.
And as it relates to DBA contracts, we have a phenomenal percentage. It appears that the dollar values on a percentage basis may be somewhat lower in terms of dollars, 15.9, 16% of expenditures compared to our percentage of participation is higher.
Yeah.
Is that fairly customary? Is it?
It varies greatly, and we have concerns about that too. So one of the things we're in the process of implementing is in our cost tracking software, we're having it modified so that we can actually program in time when those DBE contracts are supposed to occur. That will be able to create then an S-curve of DBE expenditures independent from the overall expenditures. Then we'll know exactly where we are. So I'm not real concerned about it because I think we have such strong commitment from our contractors, and we know that the total program is there. We know, with each contract how they're going to achieve their stated goal of 16, 20, 22, whatever it is. But it is a concern that it's running low at this point.
Is their goal a percentage of people employed or people, and also measured by the dollars expended, so that you have two forms of inclusivity? Numbers of participants, contracts, if you will, numbers of workers, and then the value of that employment. Is there?
The percentages are based on the contract values. So, however, our contractors, knowing what our expectations are, do more than just go out looking for numbers. They go out looking for success stories and building capacity in the community, because that's what we demand.
One additional question. If we look at the map of the region, and it's good to see that activity by DBA contractors is occurring somewhat proximate to the location of the project. But if we look at, and Janelle was kind enough to share with me her presentation we'll give tomorrow on the region's demography, we have extensive ethnicity throughout the region. And yet we see in western Washington County, southwest region, and to an extent, although Damascus is a hole in the donut, there are not a lot of businesses there. We really don't see the employment extending throughout the region.
Well, it's hard to answer that employment question, but the firms, yes. And part of the challenge is that's a statewide challenge. Number one, it's the awareness piece. Folks need to know how to certify the firm as a DBE. We work in partnership with other regional governments. We work in partnership with a number of TA firms to try to attract more firms to become certified as DBEs. I mean, that's a big piece. And that absolutely has to occur in Washington County. Absolutely has to occur in Clackamas and also east of Multnomah County. Part of what you see on that map is a lot of firms who frankly have figured it out for quite some time.